Hope Hines, weeknights at 8 on News Channel 5+.
Another bridge attack. NATO jets take out a crossing in central Serbia, killing at least 11 people. Shuttle astronauts walking tall outside the new International Space Station. And a Memorial Day dilemma. America's veteran cemeteries are running out of room.
This is the CBS Evening News with John Roberts.
Good evening. There were more civilian casualties in the NATO bombing campaign in Yugoslavia today. For the first time, a group of journalists was hit. A woman from the London Times, an Italian reporter, and a French writer were wounded and their driver killed when the press convoy they were traveling in came under attack on the road between Prizren and Brezovica in southern Kosovo. And there were more deaths today when NATO bombers took out a bridge in a small town south of Belgrade. Alan Pizzi is on the scene in Varvarin, Yugoslavia.
Hours after the attack, local fishermen still searched in vain for bodies. At least 11 people died and an unknown number were missing after 2 NATO warplanes struck this bridge. Eyewitnesses said the first jet came in low just before 1 p.m. local time. 1 missile smashed the bridge at the shoreline. 14 minutes later, another attacked, 2 missiles slamming into the middle of the span. Among their victims was the local priest, beheaded as he tried to help the wounded. His body lay with 7 others in a makeshift morgue at a church where he had said Mass. Stunned residents of the farming town the bridge served said the attack came as people were heading home from a market and feast day of the local saint.
Why would they target here, is what we want to know.
This is completely agricultural part of the country, without any industry, without any military objects, without anything.
NATO explained the attack this way.
The fact that the bridge didn't have a tank on it at the time that the NATO aircraft attacked it would not mean that it was any less a military target.
On the bridge at the time, eyewitnesses said, were up to 5 civilian cars. And at the river's edge, a smashed bicycle, an old man's hat, and 2 thick rivers of congealing blood. What people here find difficult to grasp is why NATO, which repeatedly stresses its desire to avoid civilian casualties, would target a bridge on a sunny Sunday afternoon, the time when civilians are most likely to be out and about. How, one man asked, can NATO expect to come as peacekeepers when they do this? Alan Pizzi, CBS News, Varvarin.
Tough talk today from Energy Secretary Bill Richardson on the China nuclear espionage investigation. Richardson promised officials who didn't pay enough attention to security at U.S. nuclear labs will be demoted or fired.
There were communications breakdowns. There were incompetent acts. Security was not considered important, and counterintelligence was not considered as important as it should be. And at least under the people in my department, there should be accountability.
The U.S. government reportedly has expelled a nuclear scientist from India who worked at the Los Alamos National Laboratory. Newsweek magazine said this weekend the scientist was expelled last year after it was learned he had ties to India's nuclear arms program. This is rest time for the crew of the Space Shuttle Discovery, which is docked with the International Space Station. Earlier, 2 of the astronauts put in some overtime on a spacewalk. They hooked up a 9-foot-long extendable crane that eventually will be used to help expand the orbiting station. The spacewalk was planned for 6 hours, but lasted almost 8. Joining us now from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida to discuss the shuttle mission is our CBS News space consultant, Bill Harwood. And Bill, just how important are these spacewalks to the eventual construction of the space station?
John, they're all important. You know, dozens of spacewalks are scheduled from now through completion in 4 years. This one didn't have a lot of razzle-dazzle to it, but getting those supplies over to the station is absolutely critical. It's interesting because I think spacewalks used to be the exception to the rule for NASA. They're very safety conscious, and spacewalks are inherently more risky, but spacewalks are now the rule. Every space station assembly flight features spacewalks.
What's on the schedule for the astronauts today?
Well, they're going to open the hatches and actually float into this floating laboratory. They're going to go inside, start moving some 2 tons of supplies over to the station, and they're also going to attempt some repairs. They had problems with the U.S. radio system, and they're going to tinker with the electrical system in the Russian Zarya module. Relatively minor stuff, but it's going to keep them busy for the next 4 or 5 days.
After they get all the equipment transferred over there, get it all set up, how long before somebody actually moves in for a few months at a time?
Well, that really depends on the Russians. They're scheduled right now to launch a critical module, the initial crew quarters, in November atop a Russian rocket. If that module does in fact get in orbit, the first 3-man crew, led by U.S. Commander Bill Shepard, will dock with the station on a Russian Soyuz rocket in